All right. Tweeting it out. All right. Tweeting it out. All right. Tweeting it out. All right, guys, welcome into an impromptu DNB Live emergency recording of the DNVR Nuggets Podcast. Harrison Wind here, along with Brendan Vogt. Good morning, man. All right, guys. I cannot hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Now
Great start. Great start. Okay. Good morning, Harrison. But not a great morning for Nuggets fans today. For Jamal Murray and his teammates, I'm sure. But I don't think either of us were surprised by this. I know I wasn't.
Yeah, so I mean, we were speculating about this on the post-game show last night. For those of you who tuned in, this looked serious when it happened. It honestly reminded me of this injury that Derrick Rose had when he tore his ACL, whenever that was back in 2008. I don't even remember, 2009, 2010. It was a similar type of action, like a similar type of play, to be quite honest. And I thought it was a torn ACL when it happened. Obviously, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. You were hoping for the best. Mike Malone said after the game last night that some of his assistants were kind of hoping it was only a hyperextension. And if you remember, Joel Embiid had that hyperextension a little bit ago that looked really serious, and it turned out to only be a hyperextension. But it's a torn ACL. Jamal Murray's out for the rest of the year. He's going to be out, I believe, or I think he's going to likely be out a couple months into next season as well, depending on how long this rehab takes. So it's a shitty situation. There's really no way to spin it. It's a brutal, brutal blow. Absolutely crushing.
Yeah, I mean, I really thought about the Embiid injury right away, and I was hoping it was that deal. You know, one reason why I wasn't in a rush to get on Twitter and declare what I thought I saw from replay, but it didn't look good, non-contact, and it's going to be like, the bummer really is that it happened, so late in the season, not just for this, obviously, this season's implications, but how it might cost Jamal some time next year as well. So it's devastating, man. I mean, we'll talk about what comes next, right? Season isn't over. Jamal Murray isn't dead. He's a competitor. He's going to rehab his knee. And like, nothing's definitively closed yet in terms of windows or anything like that, but we don't have to sugarcoat it. It's devastating.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk about Jamal a little bit, because like, injuries suck. Injuries are a part of the game. They're what happened. Tim Connelly says this all the time. Like, injuries are just a part of the game. Like, these things happen. But man, does it absolutely suck? Does it absolutely suck for this to happen to Jamal Murray when he was on the verge of going back to the playoffs and trying to back up what he did in the bubble last postseason, when these Nuggets were on the verge of what really had the feel over the last month or so of a dream season, especially over the last couple weeks after they got Aaron Gordon at the trade deadline. The timing of this, man, injuries suck. They happen, but my God, the timing is just absolutely brutal.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're all thinking about, what this does for the team and timelines. But for me personally, the first place my head went was, like, Jamal really doesn't deserve this. He played his heart out in that bubble. Shortest offseason in professional sports history. Comes back and really had to grind to get back to that level, and he did it. I mean, you can tell he's exhausted physically, mentally. What he's fighting for alongside his teammates. And look, this was a guy that was breaking into stardom and entering his prime, and he'll still have one. It's 2021. Medical science has come a long way. We know he's the kind of guy who we can trust to attack his rehab. But just for him, you're bummed because this was a guy who was good enough and was putting in the work to change things for an organization that had really embraced him.
Yeah. And if you think about Murray's season, like he started off slow. He's always been a slow starter. And I think a big reason for his slow start this year was because of the bubble. And I don't think we're ever going to truly understand how much of a physical and mental toll the bubble was on a lot of guys, particularly Jamal Murray. I wrote this as that Lakers series was wrapping up, but Jamal Murray was running a 10K every other day in the bubble with the fact that the NBA's playoff schedule was every other day. He was expending an incredible amount of energy. I believe he finished 4th in total minutes in the bubble, and the Nuggets didn't even play in the finals. That, and then he had the 2-month off season where, based on his comments, he didn't really seem like he did much basketball-wise. He said after the All-Star break he needed to take, the entire All-Star break off. He didn't touch a ball the entire All-Star break. I really got the feel with Jamal, and there were even times during the regular season where we would ask him, are you concerned about the Nuggets? Are you worried about, you guys are around a 500 team in February? And he would laugh it off. Jamal Murray really gave off the impression that his entire goal this season was just to get to the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think what he did last year in those playoffs, like you really saw, I think, like a sense of fulfillment in a human being beyond there was basketball fulfillment, but even in his comments after the game, like it was filling a hole in him, at that time when times were really hard for people all around the country, especially Black people. And it filled a hole for him on and off the court. So like, this is something that was taken away from him, and it's a bummer. He'll be back out there. He'll get another shot. But this was a year where everyone was feeling like they were good enough. And I'm with you. I think Jamal was right up there, and he was waiting to see what they could do.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just upset that I'm not going to be able to watch him in the playoffs because throughout his career, man, even in his second season against the Oklahoma City Thunder on national TV, the game that Gary Harris hit that game winner, the Gary shot, the shot as it's called, in that game, Jamal Murray absolutely broke Steven Adams' ankles in that game. That was really one of the first games where Jamal Murray really broke out and showed signs that he could become a star. He has always risen to the national stage if the Nuggets were playing on. He has always raised his game in those big moments. He had a really great playoff debut in 2019 that not a lot of people talk about. He was bad in Game 7 against Portland, but he was really, really solid for that being his playoff debut. And then last year, we all know what he did, a historic run in the bubble. He is such a big game player. That kills me. I feel for him because how much he was looking forward to that. And he's just not going to be able to display his talents on the biggest stage. And I mean, that's probably what kills me most right now.
Yeah. And you can see the reaction online today, obviously, pervades far beyond Nuggets Nation. I mean, there are basketball fans all over that are really bummed to see this, Lakers fans, Clippers fans, who I'm sure did not want to see Jamal Murray again. Even more bummed to see that no one will see him at all now. Because it was so fun what he did last year. So, I was expecting more of the same, to be honest. Maybe not that level, but something similar. I was expecting him to look like a leader and look like a guy who was, a 16-game player. So it'll be a long wait till we get to see him in that spot again. And it's tough, man. It's tough for Jamal. It's tough for the team.
Yeah. I want to talk about what kind of ramifications this might have for the team. How I think there could be an opportunity for a bit of a galvanizing moment. To be quite honest, what this means for Michael Porter Jr., we're going to get to that. What this means for Nikola Jokic, what this means for Aaron Gordon, how he can help fill the void, and what some realistic playoff hopes are for this team. In the interim, we know Jamal Murray's out for the rest of the season. Denver has been rumored to be interested in some free agents out there. Friend of the show, Mike Singer, we talked about this last night on the pregame and postgame show, but he reported that the Nuggets could be interested in Austin Rivers, Troy Daniels, Gerald Green. It would seem to me, reading the tea leaves, that Jamal Murray's injury kind of changes the calculation there. Do you think there's going to be more of a immediate push to sign somebody in the wake of this injury?
I mean, fair to expect, right? Doesn't Austin Rivers just seem so much more likely now? A scoring guard, probably the best of that bunch that was mentioned. And obviously not nowhere near a Murray approximate, but down a scoring guard, they're probably going to need to pick one up here. As far as starters go, I'm fairly certain they just slide Monte in, and that's the right move. But you're going to want to try to add some punch off the bench if you can. And Rivers makes more sense now than ever, in my opinion. What do you think?
He probably does. And I said on the pregame show last night that he's the best player out of those three, ahead of Gerald Green, Troy Daniels, and Austin Rivers. He's the best player out of those three, but the worst fit. That was with a healthy Jamal Murray. He's probably a much better fit now, obviously, now that Jamal is out. Look, I still don't think it's something that's going to move the needle.
Yeah.
Could it help in a playoff game? Yes. There's obviously a much greater chance an Austin Rivers could help in a playoff game now than he would have before Jamal got injured. I mean, he's the type of playmaking guard that can just make stuff happen. He's kind of Will Bartney in a sense. He's kind of PJ Dozier in a sense. So Denver, I feel like, would have an influx of those guys. There'd be some overlap there. But, I mean, now at this point, you just might be looking for another guy who could make stuff happen.
Yeah, I mean, you're just looking to add talent, right? Any way you can. And I do think I at least view him that way, as the talented guy of that bunch. So, but you're just not going to replace Jamal Murray, not even close. So what can you do? There's no reason not to. There's still an MVP guy at the helm there, front runner, and Jokic and Porter and Gordon and Barton. So they're going to enter these playoffs with good players, and they're going to try to win. And so I think you look at Austin Rivers as a guy with talent that maybe can help, but it's still certainly a down bad situation.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at Austin Rivers' stats, he played 21 games with the Knicks this year, 7.3 points, 43% from the field, 36.5% from three. I mean, a guy with those numbers, and I don't think Austin Rivers is regarded as like an elite defender. I think he's a good defender. He could be a fine defender. He's experienced. He's got a lot of minutes under his belt. He certainly knows what he's doing out there, but I don't think typically a guy with those numbers would get run on the Nuggets. But I mean, hey, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world to pick him up. And I would think that, yes, now that this injury has happened, there's there's an increased urgency, I would say, to sign somebody. Vogt, what do you think this means for the rest of the guys on this roster now? I'll let you take your pick. MPJ, Nikola Jokic, Aaron Gordon, Monte Morris. I mean, for one of those guys, whoever you want to start with, what does it mean for them?
I think we can start with Jokic, who was looking all around exhausted, I think, the last week or two. Obviously, the team had been cruising. He was playing well. But we can all see it, I think, maybe a creeping either frustration or exhaustion. Just sort of all the stuff that comes with being a Jokic, that, it's been a learning process for him to embrace that. I think the wheels got a little loose the last week or two. And, if he was growing tired, it's not going to get any easier now, right? As the leader and the best player, so much is on his shoulders, so much more than even before. So, I think first, Jokic and Porter, obviously, biggest implications are for them, but so much falls on Jokic's shoulders here.
Yeah, and I think and I really wonder if this could be a moment where Nikola Jokic refocuses. Like you said, he seemed a little fried over the last couple of games. It's perfectly understandable with the load he's had to take on this year, just how hectic and how streamlined this season has been, this regular season, unlike any other. I wonder if this can be an opportunity for him to refocus and say, all right, like, it's really up to me now. I don't have Jamal Murray to fall back on if he's really having a good night and I can just look to set him up. I've really got to step my game up and get back to where I was a week ago, because it's only been a couple games where Jokic has really looked like this. So I wonder if this could be a little bit of a refocusing moment for him. And I wonder if he just turns it back on. The flip side of that is, defenses probably have more of a refined strategy against the Nuggets right now. Double teaming Jokic without Jamal Murray out there will probably be the default strategy. So there's, that other side of the coin.
Yeah. And so Monte Morris is going to have to be some sort of catch and shoot threat here. Obviously, Will Barton will have to be consistent. That'll trickle down the line. You're definitely right about that. Game planning for Jokic is so much easier. Game planning for Denver in the fourth quarter, right? I mean, it's just going to be about making anyone other than Jokic beat you. So it's tough. When you look at Porter, and man, we've talked all year about how fast he's had to grow up. And that's all accelerated even more now. I mean, what a first handful of years in the NBA for this kid, who will now have to try to be the second best player on a title team. Well, just 3 months ago, it was like, hey, can he learn how to play defense? So the talent's there. And I'm sure he believes in himself, but he's got pressure too. He's got pressure too now.
Yeah, this is a massive test for Michael Porter Jr. And it's pretty crazy how this whole year he has been refining his game to fit alongside Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, and he's refined it beautifully. I mean, I've written about how he's kind of become the Nuggets version of Klay Thompson. He has been and fit into and played the perfect offensive role next to Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. It's really been a commendable direction that he's gone with his offensive game, because I can assure you it was not easy for Michael Porter Jr. to fit into this third offensive role. Nope. It was not easy, but he's done it perfectly. His chemistry with Nikola Jokic right now is in such a different place from where it was at the beginning of the season. Those two have a great synergy with one another. But now I wonder if he's kind of got to pivot his game again to be that more default number one, number two offensive guy.
And it's a different thing. And we've seen, in those last games without Murray, and even a little bit last night with him back, like different approach from Porter, a second best player approach, if you will. And it bore less fruit. Like it wasn't, to some extent he was chucking. Now, I think he's going to hit a lot of these shots that he's been missing. And they definitely need him to just get him up now. You want him to take smart shots as much as possible. But, in the playoffs, it comes down to like, the defense knows where we're going. We know where the defense is going. Can we make tough shots? And for Jamal and Jokic, it was a resounding yes. And that's why that team went to the conference finals. It's got to be a yes for Porter now as well, who will have more attention on him in the postseason for sure.
I assume, and I'd be pretty surprised if this didn't happen, but Monte Morris will definitely step into the starting lineup, I would have to think. I know Facu Campazzo has been starting these last couple of games, and Monte asked to come off the bench, kind of in an effort to get back into his normal six-man role, with the understanding that Jamal Murray was coming back like he did last night for really the entire game until his last 50 seconds. I would have to think that Monte Morris is now the Nuggets starting point guard, right?
Yeah, that's the case, I think.
I mean, that would be the right decision. Monte is a much better option than Facu Campazzo there, even though like Facu played the best defense out of anybody on Steph Curry last night. I thought he actually played pretty good defense at times. But yeah, Monte's, I think, will be the choice to be that starter. He's solid defensively. He's a good outside shooter. He can run his team. He can play Jokic ball. And, Brendan, I would not be surprised if the Nuggets offense, maybe it drops off a little bit, but I still think they can be a top 5 offense with Monte Morris at the starting point guard position.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you put a traditional point guard alongside Jokic, then you give him athletes in Porter and Gordon and shooters in Barton and Porter. Yeah, it's a blueprint for a very, very potent offense. That'll be okay, I think. I mean, it's not the same in the conference finals and the fourth quarter. It's not the same at all. Like I just said, it's going to be about that tough shot making, and you take Murray all day long. Across a series of across 4 quarters, I think the offensive rating will be okay. Monte's played better defense this last few games. He's typically game for that challenge, but it's just he's not very big. And like last year in the playoffs, so many times I felt like he was in the right position and it didn't matter. So, that sort of like switchable thing and sort of upgraded team defense they were feeling like they were entering. It's probably all different now with Monte there, right?
Yeah. And like, quite honestly, without Murray there, with Monte there, there's going to be some vibes that are similar to like the Utah 7 game, or when the undermanned Nuggets beat the Bucks when they had like barely lost at home all year last year, or even this year when Denver's been undermanned. I think we could see some effect like to that, where Denver, and this is going to seem crazy to say, but the ball's still going to get popping. I believe, at least. Jamal Murray is an incredible player, but the ball stops at times when he's on the floor and the Nuggets are running their offense. Monte Morris is going to keep that ball moving. Facu Campazzo is going to keep that ball moving. So I think the Nuggets offense is going to be fine. Now, will they be a better playoff offense? I don't think so. Because like you were saying, in the playoffs, a lot of times it just boils down to who can get you a bucket when you really need a bucket. And the Jokic-Murray 2-man game in the playoffs is maybe the most reliable go-to offensive action in the league. That's going to be debilitating. The Nuggets not having that in their back pocket is absolutely crushing. But from a regular season standpoint, I think the offense can be okay.
Yeah, definitely. And step right at Porter now with that Porter-Jokic 2-man game that was blossoming, getting a lot of attention, right? We've been talking about it lately, and it's now a focal point. I mean, there is something there. The give and goes. He's a comfortable shooter out of a DHO, even if he isn't much of a ball handler. They figured some stuff out, but it just isn't the same as what's been the staple and the ultimate failsafe for this team for 3 years now.
Yeah. And the 2-man game is obviously huge. Like, it was really the Nuggets' identity last season. It was the Nuggets' offensive identity in the bubble, the Jokic-Murray 2-man game. But there's so many other aspects of the offense where Jamal Murray helps out. I forget which visiting coach said this the other game. I don't know if it was Steve Clifford before the Magic game. I don't know if it was Stan Van Gundy before a Pelicans game a couple games ago. I'm not sure. But one of them was talking about how the Nuggets use Jamal Murray as the screener and invert so many of their actions. Jamal is a really underrated screener. And a lot of times in the Nuggets offense, he'll screen for Jokic, instead of the other way around. He'll screen for Aaron Gordon.
Great point.
And the backstory on this is Jamal actually grew up playing center for a portion of his youth basketball career. He was always really tall. So he's a good screener. He knows how to screen, and he can surprise some bigs. And the tough part about defending those actions is now you got the point guard who's guarding Jamal, and Jamal is setting the screen. The point guard doesn't know how to play defense on that. The center's just thrown out of whack because he's not used to a point guard screening him.
Right.
That dynamic of the Nuggets offense has been so valuable. It's been one of the Nuggets' biggest tools. That's gone as well. That's something you don't think about, but that's just gone now.
It's a phenomenal point, man. And if, for anyone who's seen like Adam Mars's list since Aaron Gordon got to town, big part of what they're doing to get everyone shots here, right? But Gordon specifically in some of those actions, you get the horn set and Murray sets the back screen. And what do? You either trail Gordon with a lane to the rim, you switch your 3 onto Murray or your 1 onto Gordon, or your 4, whatever it is. I mean, it unlocked so much for them. That's just one example, but you're right. Like without him, it's not just the scoring element. I mean, a lot of what they did on offense involved him as a screener, as a cutter, as a threat, right? Just gravity. So, it changes everything.
So do you think Aaron Gordon can be due for a little bit more of an increase in his offensive usage right now? Because, Aaron Gordon in Orlando was averaging, around 12 shots a game. He's averaging 8 shots a game in Denver. Could he be in for a little bit of an increase here?
I mean, I think everyone will be naturally, right? I don't know how much you want to mitigate this by just putting the ball in his hands. Do you want to get him shots? Sure. But Ideally, those are like looks at the rim via Jokic passes like they were. It's not, every now, I think 2 to 3 times a game, maybe he can break down a mismatch, make some really cool plays, but that's not really, I think, optimizing this offense. So I don't know, man. I'm not sure if I view Gordon that way. What about you?
I don't view him as a guy who you're going to want taking, 2 ISOs a game now up from 0. I think the Nuggets' key to success without Jamal Murray is to get the ball popping, to get the ball movement, play that equal opportunity brand of basketball that they play when they're at their best. And in that system, I think Aaron Gordon could be just naturally due for some more shots, but he's just going to have to play his role. And a big part of that is going to be knocking down the 3. Yeah. I put some of these stats out on Twitter yesterday, and they're a little adjusted for last night's game because I believe Aaron Gordon hit a 3 or 2 last night. He went 1 or 2 from 3 last night. But with the Nuggets, Aaron Gordon shooting 7 of 23 from 3. That's 30.4%. He was shooting 37.5% in Orlando. So he just has not really been able to find his rhythm from 3. And the thing about that Orlando shooting percentage, Gordon's, he was shooting 37.5% from 3 total. He was shooting 40% from 3 on catch and shoot threes, though. And if you look at his shot breakdown in Denver so far, he's taken 23 3-pointers total. 22 of those have been catch and shoot threes. And they all have been open or wide open per NBA.com. Every single
4 feet or more. Is that how that's designated?
The closest defender 4 feet away or more. So he's getting wide open shots. He's getting catch and shoot shots, the exact type of 3-pointers that the Nuggets want him to be taking. He's just not hitting them right now. So it seems kind of simple. He's just going to have to start hitting some more threes.
This was going to be a factor in the playoffs prior to this news, right? I mean, you talked about helping Jokic. Where does the help come from? I think maybe a lot of teams would help off Gordon if you really look at that starting 5 as it was healthy. He's a devastating cutter, but he's certainly the guy you would want to take the catch and shoot over Barton, Porter, Murray. It's going to be more so of a factor now. And yeah, I would anticipate help coming from him at times to Jokic's man. I would anticipate teams just kind of sort of packing the paint a little bit and not necessarily fearing that shot. He can hit some shots, but he's not a runoff guy, as Jokic has described Porter in the past. And that will matter, like everything else, that will matter even more now.
Yeah. And it's so important for him to hit those threes, like you were saying, because he is going to be left open. And it's the one concern I have about Gordon in a playoff environment. Like I can just imagine a first round matchup against the Los Angeles Lakers. Maybe that's not going to come to fruition anymore. Even though before last night, it seemed like the Nuggets and Lakers were on a collision course to meet in the first round. But if the Nuggets and Lakers did meet in a series, I can just imagine LeBron James guarding Aaron Gordon and just, if Gordon's in the corner, not even leaving the paint.
Sure.
I can imagine LeBron making Aaron Gordon beat him from 3. And can he? He's shown the ability to hit catch and shoot shots in the past, even as early as this season in Orlando. He hasn't with the Nuggets, so he's just going to have to knock those down.
Now, one thing, though, I will say that's different from him, from like a Torrey Craig, right, who we might have talked about in a similar way in this role almost in the past. Gordon can be a threat without shooting. Like, is he going to capitalize on that space for timely cuts, right? Is he going to read the timing of that help and be able to help Jokic accordingly? He's got ways to stay valuable as an offensive player without necessarily knocking down shots. But this will happen. He will be open.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. He's, for how active he's been as a cutter, and I've been pretty impressed with him as a cutter so far, he's probably just going to have to be even more active.
Yep.
He's going to have to be moving even more without the ball. He's not going to be able to wait for, the Murray Jokic 2-man game and just be chilling in the corner or in the dunker spot. He's going to have to just kind of be more involved in the ebbs and flows of Denver's offense. So I'm curious to see how his game kind of adjusts as well. Anybody else that you could see taking on a bigger role? I mean, Will Barton, he's probably going to have more offensive responsibility now. PJ Dozier, we always joke how it's MVPJ. He's always looking for his offensive game. He's always looking for a shot. They might need some more offense from him now too.
Yeah, but how about Facundo Campazzo, Harrison, who I think was probably out of the playoff rotation, or at least in that discussion of guys who might be out of that rotation. Now, I think you expect him to play, right? I mean, we'll see what Denver does in terms of the buyout market, but even still, just based off, from a bird's eye view, from a distance, Malone's apparent relationship with Facu and how much he believes in him, I think he's back in things now, back in the full swing of things. So that's one player I think who's going to have a little bit more on his plate now.
That's a good point. Facu's coming off 2 really good games, actually. And look, I've been harsh on Facu, but I've really liked how he's played these last 2. Against Boston, I thought he was really good. Even though the Nuggets lost that game, obviously, Facu was a +1.
Yep.
Denver outscored Boston by 1 point when he was on the floor. 14 points, 3 of 3 from three-point range, 4 assists against Boston in 33 minutes. And then last night against the Warriors, I thought he was pretty good as well. 21 minutes, 2 of 2 from 3, 6 points. He was a +12, a team high +12. It's the best plus-minus mark on Denver.
4 threes.
Yeah, 2 assists, 0 turnovers. Yeah, he's hitting his threes now. He's hot from 3 at this moment. We'll see if that stays, but that kind of changes everything with him, I feel like, because he's going to be wide open. He's going to be wide open really on every possession if he wants to take that 3.
I think something clicked for him in this last week or 2. It just sort of looked like he's realized that in the NBA, if he's not a threat to score at all, then even his playmaking is just severely mitigated. And I think he's starting to learn that. And honestly, the easiest way for him to score is going to be taking and making open threes, especially from the corner. So that's a good sign. I don't think, like what you said, like Monte will start. I don't really think like adding Facu into this mix is necessarily like now things are great again. But hey, he's playing better. And so there's a silver lining standpoint there for Facu fans and Argentinian fans of Facu. I think he's back in the mix.
Yeah, I have to agree, particularly with how he's played over these last couple games. He's definitely going to be in the mix, 20-plus minutes per game. I'd be surprised if he played anything less than that. Vogt, what do you think are realistic playoff hopes for Denver now?
I mean, it's really tough because it's looking increasingly like they're headed towards the Lakers' first round. And without Murray, I think there are if they're playing Dallas or Portland or something first round without Murray, I would still pick Denver personally. But definitely not going to do that in a Lakers series. Probably wasn't going to pick them anyway, unless Braun and AD looked pretty rough coming back from injuries. So first round Lakers with no Jamal Murray. There's no point in writing this team off. They have Jokic, they have Porter, they have Gordon, they have good players on this basketball team, and they're not going to give up. So we'll see, but you can't sugarcoat this, man. Like, you can back this all the way out to how many teams in NBA history would still contend for a title if they lost their second best player. And I think if there are any teams on that list, it's a very, very short one.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because really over these last couple of weeks, I felt like the Nuggets, for the first time since I've been covering this team, and it's been for the last 5 seasons, for the first time I've genuinely felt like they could win a championship.
Yeah.
I've never felt like that before. I did not feel like that last year. I felt like that over the last couple of weeks, though. After they got Aaron Gordon, how seamlessly he fit into this thing, how it was apparent from the jump that he was really willing to buy into such a secondary and tertiary and distant offensive option, and he was fine not really getting a ton of touches, a ton of shots. The second I saw that, and the second I saw him really play some impressive defense on Kawhi Leonard in that win over the Clippers, I thought this team could win the championship. I really did. I don't think they can win the championship now. I don't think they can with Jamal Murray. That doesn't mean they can't go on a run, though.
Right.
I still think they can go on a run. They have the best player in the league. They have the MVP of the league. They have some really talented playmakers and offensive players around him. I think there's a chance they can still go on a run. They'll need things to go their way. They'll need Jokic to play out of his mind. They'll need Will Barton to be better than he's been. They'll need everybody to step up. But I'm with you that you can't just bury this team. You can't bury this team because we've seen what this team can do.
There's no point.
Bury them. We've seen this. We've seen what they can do when people bury them. They're as resilient as any team I've ever seen, as any team I've ever covered, as any team I've ever watched. They're an incredibly resilient bunch. And a big part of that was Jamal Murray. But another big part of that was Nikola Jokic and Michael Malone and a lot of guys who are still on this team. So I'm not willing to bury these guys yet.
Yeah, I mean, without getting carried away, like we both said it pretty explicitly there. There's really no chance at winning a title without your second best player. And that's not doom and gloom. That's just being realistic. But can we do some optimistic perspective here? What if LeBron and AD don't look great coming back from injury and it takes them a little bit to play back into form and the Nuggets take the MVP front runner into that series, right? What if they go into a series with a Phoenix, Utah, whoever it may be, Clippers next, and it's okay, there's Barton back this time, and it's not the same as Murray, but we didn't have him, and Porter's a different player than he was last year, and Gordon's a different type of physical profile player than we've had. You can talk yourself into this being something less than miserable. And then I bring that up to say it's 2021. Like, tearing your ACL is not the end of your career. It's devastating, but Jamal Murray will be back. And so if there's a run this year and there's something to galvanize behind and he attacks the rehab the way we all expect him to, no windows have closed yet. This is one of the worst things that could have happened, but no windows have closed and there's no point to shut this team out. There's no point.
Here's another thing I thought about and another reason for some optimism and another reason why Denver still has maybe a little playoff run in them. We've seen how this team at times has maybe folded is the wrong word, but not really risen to the occasion when the lights are on them, when the pressure's on them. This game last night, it felt like that Clippers game from last season in the regular season when Denver just got beat down. We saw how they got down 3-1 against the Jazz and the Clippers. And Nikola Jokic said this. When they were down 3-1, they didn't have any pressure on them. All the pressure was on the Jazz. All the pressure was on the Clippers. And then Denver just started playing. Then the Nuggets just started playing free. That is really something with this team. I really do feel like it is. And now, Nuggets have no pressure. They have absolutely no pressure. They have absolutely no expectations. Everybody's going to pick them to lose in the first round. They're right back as the underdog. They're right back as the dark horse that nobody believes in, that nobody's going to be picking to make a run, that everybody's going to be saying is going to be frauds in the playoffs, that everybody's going to be that everybody's going to want to say has the fakest MVP candidate of all time. Nuggets have no pressure right now, and I think they can lean into that.
For sure. Absolutely. And you just lean on Jokic. You trust in Jokic. He's been that guy, and it's different without Jamal, but they've still got Jokic, and that's the bottom line. I also think about Philadelphia. The Kawhi shot bounces a million times. Ben Simmons gets hurt. Last year's playoffs, absolute dud. And there's a lot of conversation about, is it time? Is it time? And this is a team that's way further down their timeline than Denver is, right? Is it time to blow this thing up? It's not working. Now, they made a lot of changes this year, bringing in Murray, bringing in different role players. But they stuck with Embiid and they stuck with Simmons. Simmons came back healthy, and the Sixers look really good. Think the Nuggets can still – I don't want to say they won't skip a beat because they will, but
yeah,
they can still catch up to that trajectory they were on. And I think step one – would be on the back of Jokic, on the back of Porter, having some sort of encouraging run here, whatever that looks like without Murray, and just keeping the hope, the momentum going.
I think I saw a couple super chats come through here. This one from our guy, Scott Carpenter. Best wishes for Jamal. Personally, it's a reminder for me to not get so wrapped up in the game by game. I'll still have fun watching and accept it all. Look, man, this this is basketball. This is what like following a team religiously is all about. Injuries happen. And this is just one of those things that is an absolutely crushing blow, but it's something that comes with the sport. It really is. These injuries happen all the time. I mean, look at Golden State. Golden State's had back-to-back season-ending injuries from Klay Thompson. You know? Like, this stuff is brutal. And it absolutely happens. So, yeah, I think that's definitely good perspective from Scott.
Let me just be clear. I saw some comments there. I am not in any way advocating for the Nuggets to blow it up. I was pointing to Philly as an example of how an injury doesn't necessarily derail you. That's my point, is Denver should not panic at all, as bummer as this is. To your point, Wind, these things just happen. And, you know, there's a lot of desire to place the blame right now. And I don't understand why, like, you know, whether it's the training staff, Michael Malone, you know, the NBA and the shortened schedule, we just don't have causation here definitively one way or another. And guys just get hurt. So he could have had that same injury. Maybe if he played any less minutes, any more minutes, he could have had that injury last year. He could have had it the year before. We don't know. This just happens. So, you know, for me, like I have seen that expressed online a lot. And it's like, this is the kind of thing where, you know, without causation, there's no point in placing blame. And you just hope for Murray to recover and just leave it at that.
Yeah, I've seen that too. And look, if you want to blame Michael Malone for this injury, just like get out of this chat right now. Like, that's just not what we're going to do. It's not accurate. It's bullshit if you're trying to blame Michael Malone for this injury. It was a freak injury, I think. Now, it's interesting, and I put this in my article on the DNVR.com that's up right now, but Murray, it looked like, got clipped in the third quarter. I don't know if you remember this, Vote. He got clipped in the third quarter by Kevon Looney, and he kind of clipped his left knee. And I don't know if that contributed to him tearing his ACL in the fourth, but a couple people pointed that out to me, and I clipped the video. And it seemed like he did bang his knee there. Now, what happened in the fourth, I think that was just a freak injury. I think it was just a freak injury and just something that happens. But it's also crazy to just think about how Denver even got in that situation, because this was an 11-point game with 2 minutes left. And the game probably should have been over from that point on, but Jamal Murray, being the guy he is, kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And he's an absolute fighter. He's an absolute warrior. He's not the type of guy who's going to give up. And he helped get that game to within 5 points when he ended up tearing his ACL, when it probably shouldn't have been. So it's just fun to think about that.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, it was a freak injury. If he finishes that layup through contact and it's an and one, it's a 4-point game with 50 seconds left too, you know, and that's a winnable game. So it's really easy to say all this stuff in hindsight, but just a freak injury, just really unfortunate.
This is a good comment from Johnny. I totally agree.
Let's talk about this. Because a lot of big injuries to high profile players this year. Obviously, there was a rush from the NBA, and the Players Union agreed to this. However you want to interpret that, like as far as what comprises the Players Union. But the NBA wanted to get this 72-game condensed schedule in before the Olympics. That never happened. And a lot of guys have gotten hurt. So that's where a lot of people are frustrated right now today, and hard to blame them. I mean, there's a leg to stand on there, I'm sure.
Yeah, the Olympics thing always seemed really weird, and I never really bought it. I always thought that it was just more to get the season on track and like back on the normal schedule. I know they said the Olympics thing, but I just could not like put that together in my head that they were actually concerned about the Olympics. I mean, I like watching the Olympics. The Olympics are cool. I like watching Team USA in the Olympics, but honestly, who really gives a shit about the Olympics?
Yeah, dude, seriously.
This is the NBA season and the NBA playoffs. The schedule, though, right now is ridiculous. I mean, the Nuggets just played 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Nuggets just played 5 games in 7 days. The Nuggets just played 5 games in 7 days with a month left in the regular season after a 2-month off season where they pretty much played a game every other day, like for the last 4 months. That is absolutely ridiculous that a team is playing 5 games in 7 days at this point in the year. Like, what are we even doing?
Yeah, I know. And it was, even before the injury, there were a lot of conclusions being drawn about the Nuggets last night, like as if there was something to learn here about like their personality as a team. And it wasn't just that they were maybe exhausted, which they clearly were. Yeah, I don't know. Like this, a lot of these scheduling blunders seemed avoidable. And so, I don't know what the total injuries are, right, compared to last year. Like, if you look at or years prior, whatever the average number of injuries that occur, like whatever the severity is, I don't know how it all stacks up, if it's actually worse this year. But it sure feels like it when you look at the high-profile names that have been out, and it's really easy to point to that as a reason why.
I mean, this just like blows my mind. The Nuggets played a back-to-back exactly a week ago. Tuesday at home against the Pistons, Wednesday at home against San Antonio. And that Pistons game, maybe I'll actually give the NBA a little bit of a break on this one because that was the game that was postponed over the first half of the season. And I don't know why they had to fit it in there to make it a back-to-back for Denver, but apparently they did. So they played a back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday of last week, had a day off, then played Friday, had a day off, then played Sunday, and obviously played the back-to-back last night, the Boston Golden State one, where they had to fly to Golden State. I know every team's going through it, so I'm not trying to say like the Nuggets have a tougher schedule than anybody, but I mean, to be playing 2 back-to-backs that close to each other at this point in the year where everybody's tired, where everybody's fatigued. Michael Malone spoke about this the other day in the pregame. He's like, you can definitely feel the physical and mental fatigue weighing on these guys right now. And I'm sure it's weighing on everybody in the league. So to have this compressed of a schedule at this point in the year, it seems a little ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a Nuggets-specific issue, right? And it seems to have affected every team, especially when you consider that this was going to be a sort of spread thin year as it was for teams with near certain COVID absences coming, right? So I don't know. It seemed short-sighted at the time, and it's really easy to point that out now. I mean, look, it's not causation for sure. This could have happened last year. It could have happened a year before, but it's not a great look. It's not a great look for Silver in the league today.
Yeah. Let's take some questions from the comment section. If you guys have really good questions, only really good questions, ask them, and we'll put them up here and discuss. Brendan, I'm going to go to this one first here. Does Bol get any run now? I know everybody wants to know. This is what the chat's asking. This is what all Nuggets fans are asking right now. Does Bol get any run?
Maybe. I don't think so. I mean, I don't necessarily look at the way the rotation shakes out and you go, okay, Bol is next man up in any of these positions, especially if they're going to go and try to get someone on the buyout market like Austin Rivers. Not that they play similar positions, just in terms of getting guys on the court off the bench. And I also don't think that Denver's going to punt this season. That's just not how they're going to approach this, nor should they. So they've got some seeding stuff to figure out. They're going to want to win some games down the stretch here. And so unless it's blowouts, I don't think we see any more of Bol.
Yeah, I don't think Bol's in the cards here. Look, Denver's still going to really be trying to win games and push for a top 4 seed. I don't think Bol helps you win games right now. I just don't. I think he needs to develop, and I don't see him getting any run. This question from David: does this injury really damage the Nuggets' chances of ever winning a ring with this group?
This is where I'm at with like the doom and gloom thing. And this was my point with Philly, by the way. I wasn't talking about Denver blowing anything up. Your perspective can change a lot from point A to point B when point A is injury to star player right before the playoffs and point B is recovery. So does it affect their chances of ever winning? I want to stop short of saying that. Murray could come back. They could look great in the playoffs next year, however less likely it is. This year, definitely, undoubtedly so. It affects their chances.
Yeah, obviously this year, the thing that was so perfect about acquiring Aaron Gordon, though, was that it wasn't a 1 year or bust type deal. It wasn't a championship or bust type deal with Gordon. He is under contract next year. And I've spoken about this before on the podcast, but Aaron Gordon's contract ending and Michael Porter Jr.'s rookie extension starting, those things are happening in the same year. So that works out for Denver as well. I think there's a slim chance if the Nuggets want to go into luxury tax, that's the big question. If they want to go into luxury tax and re-sign both those guys, they can absolutely run it back for 2, 3, 4 years with this group. Will that happen? We'll see. We'll see if Denver ownership views this as a contending enough team to pay the luxury tax. But Denver can absolutely run it back with this group for years to come if they want to. I think Aaron Gordon likes this situation. I mean, obviously, everybody would love a situation when they're going from Orlando, where they made the playoffs twice in 7 years, to a Western Conference contender like the Nuggets. Everybody loves that situation right when they get there and is fine with taking on a really reduced role. We'll see how he's feeling about that a year from now, 2 years from now. But Denver still definitely has a chance to win a title with this group.
The point you just made that's a real bummer is this could have been the audition, right? For ownership to open up the wallet. Look at this group. They're good enough. And now you can't bring that folder of evidence forth. So we'll see. Yeah, that's the really frustrating part. Barton's got that player option. Things could change quick here, but I do want to stop short of saying, that the window's closed. It's just not how it works for this group at this point in the timeline for me.
The window is definitely not closed. And don't think for a minute that Tim Connelly and the Nuggets front office is going to pivot from their we don't skip steps approach, even after a just debilitating injury like this. They're going to stick to the plan. They're absolutely going to stick to the plan. At least that's what I think. Maybe they will try to, acquire a stopgap guy going forward, looking ahead to next season, because like I mentioned at the top of the show when we first got on, Jamal Murray's rehab is likely going to extend into next season, but they're absolutely, at least I don't think, going to make any kind of moves that sacrifice their long-term success and their title window around the Murray, Porter, Jokic core. I don't think they will.
Yeah, you stay the course. Stay the course.
Yeah. When is Shaq Harrison coming to Denver? So I believe he's still on track to join the Nuggets. He wasn't in the league's health and safety protocols. He wasn't testing every day because he wasn't on a team. So he's got to produce a certain number of negative tests to officially join the Nuggets. So I think that could be happening in the next couple of days or so. But it's not a surprise that he hasn't been active or with the team so far.
Does he come into the fold now here with injuries and changes incoming?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I was definitely thinking about how Shaq Harrison could guard Steph Curry last night when Curry was absolutely cooking Jamal Murray and really every Nuggets defender that Denver threw in front of him except for Facu Campazzo for a couple possessions. I was wondering, if you look at Shaq Harrison's metrics vote, they're off the charts. His defensive metrics are absolutely nuts. I don't think a lot of people know this, but I put this in my little write-up on him when Denver made that signing official. I think it was last week. But Shaq Harrison's defensive metrics are crazy. Not from this year, because he hasn't really played this year. He played 20-something games with the Jazz. But from last year, his defensive metrics with the Bulls were nuts. He was third among all point guards in ESPN's defensive real plus minus. He was the number one rated defensive point guard in 538's Raptor metric. The Bulls had a 99.7 defensive rating with him on the court last year, a 110 defensive rating with him off the court. He ranked third in the NBA in deflections. He was second in loose balls recovered, obviously in limited minutes. But he projects as an elite defender. The Nuggets are really high on his defense. He's a mixed bag offensively, but he's flashed some signs here and there. So I'm not expecting a ton. I think when Denver brought him on, he was a guy who the Nuggets brought on like as a break glass in case of emergency type guy. If Damian Lillard's really going off in a playoff series, if Donovan Mitchell's really going off, they can try him. I don't think he was expected to be in their rotation, but I mean, maybe Denver just looks for some life at the end of their bench now.
Yep.
Let's see what else we got here. Marcus Howard, I don't think he's in the card right now.
Probably not.
Marcus Howard, I mean, I like the kid, but he can barely hit 3-pointers in garbage time right now. He did have that nasty crossover step back the other night, though.
Yeah, he's probably not the answer to this situation, though.
Yeah, probably not the answer. Let's see here. What is wrong with JaMychal Green's 3-point shot and overall offensive confidence? With Murray out, he has to step up for bench scoring, with Monte most likely starting. What do you think about JaMychal Green right now?
Twofold. First is that, he was shooting kind of like out of this world to start the season. And it should always have been expected that would come back to earth a little. But B, I would say rhythm. He missed that time with the injury, comes back. There's been a little bit of back and forth with, now there's McGee and who plays? Is it Green or Millsap? I mean, I think the biggest factor is just you can't expect him to hit half of his 3-point shots like he was at one point. But rhythm. I think rhythm is the first thing these guys would tell you, especially role players who, it's not 30 minutes you get the ball in your hands a lot every night. Yeah,
totally. I mean, like you said, JaMychal Green started off red hot from 3 at the beginning of the year. He's been really cold as of late. He's still shooting 40% from distance on the year. That's how good he was from 3 over like the first month or so of the season. But he's going to continue to get chances because I think Denver eventually settles on the JaMychal Green, JaVale McGee duo as their backup 4-5. I think they'll continue to mix Millsap in there every now and then, but when push comes to shove, my prediction is that JaVale McGee and JaMychal Green are getting those primary backup minutes. So we'll see. He'll continue to get his chances for sure. How about this one from MeCore? Does this actually make Michael Malone a lock at staying with the Nuggets for the foreseeable future? Does the Jamal Murray injury give Malone an excuse on third quarter collapses? I'll let you take this one first.
Oh, thank you. That was locked in already. At least, I guess, depends on how you want to define foreseeable future, but they were going to give him a longer leash than the third quarter collapses. I mean, the Nuggets have improved every year under his tenure. They got to the conference finals last year. All the star players have a good relationship with him, or at least it appears that way. It was going to take something monumental. So I think he was safe either way. But there's to some extent, there's an argument there's less pressure on some individuals here for the short interim.
Sure. I'd agree with that. I'll also say that the constant criticizing of Michael Malone has got to stop. It's out of freaking control.
It's ridiculous.
It's absolutely ridiculous how often Michael Malone gets criticized by Nuggets fans. I mean, what does this guy have to do? Like, to be honest, he just was instrumental, at least I think, in helping the Nuggets get to the Western Conference Finals, for inspiring that team, for giving them belief to overcome 2-3-1 deficits. I mean, what else do you want for the guy? He's handed the reins over to Nikola Jokic when Nikola Jokic was an unknown second-round pick out of Serbia who had some flashes during his rookie year, but was far from a surefire all-star. He gave Jamal Murray the keys as his starting point guard in his second year. We've criticized him for how he's handled Michael Porter Jr. Now looking back on it, he's handled Michael Porter Jr. exactly the way he should and exactly right. So stop criticizing Michael Malone. It's absolutely ridiculous. The guy's taken the Nuggets just as far as George Karl did in 10 years. Like, lay off Michael Malone.
Yeah, he's not infallible. He's not above reproach, but he's not the reason why this team hasn't won a title yet. So yeah, he's held to a ridiculously high standard.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see what else we got here from Mark. What would you think about bringing Troy Daniels back? He was part of the bubble team, would bring back some good vibes at DNVR. I agree with that last part of that.
We could use some vibes, huh? Yeah, I mean, look, he fits the bill, right? And the Nuggets, I think, in the past have shown a willingness to like kind of go back to some of these guys that they know they can sort of trust and bring in again, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it's on the table, I think.
Yeah, I think what Troy Daniels would have going for him is that the Nuggets know him. They're comfortable with him. They know how he is in the locker room. They know how he is around the organization. They know he's a good culture guy. So I think that would help Troy Daniels get back here if the Nuggets wanted to bring him back. And look, I don't think Troy Daniels is going to necessarily help the Nuggets in the playoffs, but he can shoot the heck out of the ball on paper. And maybe that's something Denver would need at some point.
Yeah, there's no buyout move they can make that's gonna instill any like substantial confidence here.
Yeah. Let us know if you guys have any more questions. We're just over an hour here, so we can probably start wrapping up pretty soon. Really, the biggest thing, and we've hit on this a little bit, but I think we should probably go back to it. The biggest guy who's got to step up, and look, everybody's got to step up. Monte likely stepping into the starting lineup. He's got to step up. Will Barton, he's going to have to be more consistent. Aaron Gordon, he's going to have to knock down threes. But Michael Porter Jr., all eyes are really going to be on him now. He's got to step into a bigger role in the offense. He's got to get that confidence back in his jumper. He's in a terrible 3-game slump from three right now. I think he's going to break out of it, but he's got to knock down shots. He's got to continue to play, efficient, unselfish basketball. And he's just got to really step up. I'm fascinated to see what happens because it's a big test for him. And I'm excited to see just if he can kind of step into that role.
Yeah, here's the fun part. Is Porter good enough to do this? Yes, 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 and then some, right? It's not like looking at, I'm trying to think of what's a fair example. I don't know, like a Pascal Siakam and saying, okay, can you really do this? Can you really be by yourself, right, without the Kawhi or whatever? Pascal's a bad example. He's a good player. You get my point. Porter's talented enough to make this happen. And so, yeah, it's a big challenge for him, but it'll be fun watching him try to step into that. And what does that mean for him going forward? Is he able to build even more confidence? Does he enter his next NBA season, with a lot of this stuff behind him, feeling really like he can move the needle in a championship race?
Yeah, I think he's a star. I think Michael Porter Jr. is a star. He's kind of a star that somehow has become underrated. And it's wild because we've been hyping him up for the last year, but he's somehow become underrated. And I know he hasn't had a great last couple games, but just what he's done this season has been underrated. Like, I think he's a star in the making. Maybe he's already one. He's incredibly efficient on the offensive end of the floor. He's already one of the best shooters in the league. He's a great rebounder. He's one of the most dangerous off-ball players in the league, playing next to Nikola Jokic at 6'10", and he's realized that this year. So this is an enormous opportunity for him, and I have a feeling he's going to embrace it. And I go back to this quote that Will Barton had at the beginning of the season when Mike had gotten off to a really good start, and Will Barton was asked about Michael Porter Jr. and just if he's surprised at all about the hot streak that he was on this season, really over the last couple months. And he said no, because one of the things that always impressed him about Mike and one of the things that jumped out to him about Mike was his professionalism and how seriously he took his craft. Like, Michael Porter Jr. is a worker. A lot of people don't know this, but he's a guy who's always in the gym. You can see it in his body. He's been super consistent in the weight room. You can see it in his game. I mean, this guy is an absolute knockdown shooter, and that's not by accident. So I'm curious to see, if he can step up.
I think he is built for it. Whether he does it this year under these circumstances at age 22 certainly won't be defining, but I think he's built for it. He loves the game of basketball. He's a hard worker. And hey, the way he responded to that Malone stuff, I mean, there was so much like, he's not going to want to do this. He's going to want out. He's already doesn't want to be in Denver. And like all he did was look in the mirror and say, how can I get better? Or at least that's the perspective we have. So yeah, I mean, look, I think he's got it in him to answer this bell for sure.
I like this comment from our guy Swipa. Everyone remember Paul George became Paul George when Danny Granger went down. That's MPJ. That's a good note. That's an interesting note right there, because an ascension like that from MPJ is definitely possible. He can take his game up another level in these playoffs, and that's good for the Nuggets. There's also a slight downside where if that happens, and look, this may already happen regardless of what Porter does from here on out, but it seems like he's trending towards a max rookie extension, and Denver's going to pay him. They have to pay him. I mean, they put this much into him where, like I said earlier, Tim Connelly's not going to divert from his plan now. They're going to stick with this core. But overall, I mean, if Michael Porter Jr. makes that leap, that's obviously a good thing for Denver, no matter how much they have to pay him.
And that's still a really good basketball team. If he does step up and answer the bell like in the ways we're describing, it's still like a top end 1-2 punch. Maybe not quite to the extent it once was.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about all I got, Vote. A tough morning for sure. An absolutely brutal morning. I can't say it was that surprising, but there was a small part of you that was wondering if maybe Denver avoided just an absolutely crushing injury. They didn't. It is an absolutely crushing injury. This is honestly like outside of a Nikola Jokic injury, this is the worst thing that could have happened to Denver at this time. The absolute worst. I mean, Jamal Murray was a primetime player, a primetime performer, a guy who rose up on the biggest stages over the last year, and he's not going to get the chance to do that this season. So it's a tough morning, but like we've said for the last hour, there's still reason for optimism. I think there's still a chance the Nuggets can go on a run. They have the MVP. They have the best player in the league. They have a playoff-tested coach, despite what a lot of people want to say. They have guys who have been in the playoffs before. So I don't think it's time to just totally count this team out. I mean, how can you count the Nuggets out after what happened last season? When their backs are against the wall, that's when they really rise to the occasion. When they have the pressure off of them, that's when they play super free. So I'm excited. Part of me is kind of excited to see what happens. I'm not going to lie.
Excited to see how they respond, what Porter does. Where I'm bummed right now is, again, just to reiterate, it's just like mostly for Jamal, who I think earned another opportunity to get back out there, more than earned it, and try to get it done again. So hoping for a swift recovery. This is a guy who has wanted to be the best, has said that out loud more than once. And so you can expect him to do what he needs to do to get back as soon as he can. And don't give up on the Nuggets. I mean, they're going to stay the course, and I think you should too. Not that anyone needs me to tell them how to fan, but, no windows have closed.
Definitely. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We had a ton of you in the show, a ton of you in the comment section. So appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we calmed some nerves, gave some hope. But the regular season goes on. The Nuggets play the Miami Heat tomorrow night. So we'll see what happens there. Hey, keep it locked to thednvr.com. We'll have a new podcast coming out as well, the DNVR Nuggets Podcast. You can find that on Spotify. You can find that on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. And also check out our written content on thednvr.com as well. Talk to you guys later.